Alright, we should be live. Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Thursdays, episode 111. This is going to be a quick recap on Computex from last week. Unfortunately, I was unable to do the show last week due to illness, which I'm still actually suffering from. So we will probably cut this episode relatively short. It's probably going to be an hour at most. But yeah, I'm not feeling too well, unfortunately. So it is what it is. News for this week, there's not a whole lot. There was last week at the show, there was the RTX 5060 launch, and then AMD announced the 9060 XT, so there are new entry-level graphics cards for the latest generations. But so how's everybody doing? Hey Mark. Hey Steven. MTT, RK, what's going on? I guess we'll just get right into it. So, there were, I guess, one of the interesting things last week, if you're not into the AI stuff, then one of the more interesting things was the new motherboards from ASRock and MSI. Those are the two that were missing some higher end offerings last year with the AM5 or the Zen 5 launch. So there is that. I can't find an article on that. We have to go and like search for one manually. We'll just have to look through here. But first, what I wanted to talk about was Intel. Intel was showing workstation graphics cards at Computex last week. And there is another Battlemage GPU that is rumored. It is the Arc B770, so this would be the highest end graphics card from Intel for the consumer market, if and when this shows up. Now, this is expected to launch in Q4 of this year, which means if you're interested in this GPU, you're going to be waiting for a while, and we already know how fast this graphics card is. I have pretty accurate estimates that it will be similar in performance to the RTX 4070. So if you're interested in an Intel graphics card that is basically a year late, and it will only be able to match the RTX 4070, which isn't even NVIDIA's latest generation. If we go to Tech Power Up here, and we look up the RTX 4070, this will be Intel's fastest GPU in terms of how good it will be. And this is like giving it the benefit of the doubt. It could actually be a little bit slower than this, but it won't be faster than this. So you can see in terms of how it compares to the newer GPUs from NVIDIA. So it is a little bit faster than the 5060 Ti. And it is slower than AMD's RX 9070 by like 36%. So it's not really going to do anything in terms of like disrupt the market, but we'll see how that pans out. But it does say here they're hoping for some kind of consumer-oriented thing. The thing is, I feel like Intel is not really that interested in the consumer GPU market anymore, and neither is NVIDIA, and AMD is also, strangely, they're all kind of too busy chasing, well, not really strangely, all three of them are too busy chasing the AI market now. NVIDIA is so far ahead in the AI space because of their software ecosystem. They have an entire platform. They don't even consider themselves just a chip company anymore. Like NVIDIA views themselves, if you've ever listened to Jensen Huang speak, like I was listening to him talk recently with Jim Cramer on, I think, Mad Money, whatever it was, and basically he's been saying that NVIDIA is an infrastructure company now, which means that they don't prioritize gaming GPUs. That's like one subdivision of one part of their company. So I wouldn't get my hopes up for like RTX 50 or RTX 6090 next year. It will come out, but it's not going to be cheap. I'll tell you that. It's not going to be any cheaper than the 5090 currently is. And if anything, it's going to be more expensive because they're trying to milk the more budget AI consumers that don't want to spend on a professional card, but they want to go and build their own home server or lab or whatever, or they're doing something with like VC funding or something, and they're gonna cheap out and buy, like consumer GPUs with as much VRAM as possible. So what you'll see is I think there's going to be more emphasis on professional workstation graphics cards from all three of them. And we have seen Intel announce some very good GPUs. Intel GPU, let me see, Intel has some Intel professional GPU. Yeah, these GPUs. Yeah, this is the stuff. So more of these type of GPUs are going to be the future because they basically know that people only care about VRAM now. So it's like if they can double the VRAM and charge double the amount of money just by doubling VRAM, they're going to take advantage of that. For people that want to buy like 4 graphics cards at a time, It's funny because we've moved away, the gaming market has moved away from like SLI and Crossfire, multi-GPU, and it's all single GPU now, but everything except gaming is moving more toward scaling across multiple graphics cards. So you think about the business opportunity here for a lot of the AIBs, they much prefer to sell multiple graphics cards to less overall individual customers versus selling one GPU per customer, because if you're selling multiple graphics cards to an individual, that individual usually knows more about technology than someone who's only buying one graphics card. Think about it, like the probability that the person who is buying 4 of these GPUs probably knows a thing or two about how they're going to use those graphics cards compared to someone who only wants to buy one just to play games. You see what I'm saying? So there's an opportunity here for not just NVIDIA, but for basically all of the GPU manufacturers. And NVIDIA doesn't really consider Intel or AMD a threat to them at this point in time. The real threat to NVIDIA is actually Huawei over in China. If anyone's going to disrupt the GPU market, it's going to come from China. It's not going to come from AMD. AMD has proven time and time again that they are unable to break NVIDIA's stranglehold on the GPU market. So now the real innovation is going to come from the fact that the US government is trying to prevent China from getting the chips, mostly NVIDIA chips, but it also kind of affects the others to a lesser extent. And that's really going to hurt NVIDIA. It's going to hurt the US more than the US government is aware, because what it's going to do is it's going to basically seed the Chinese market with the desire to overthrow not overthrow, but overtake the American technology companies with their own. And this is the sort of thing that we saw a long time ago with the automobile industry, where the American cars, and I guess the German cars, after World War II, the American brands were really, really powerful from the start. But then the Japanese car companies like Toyota rose up from the ashes and basically became a global leader in the automobile industry. So something like this so basically look at it like NVIDIA, AMD are kind of like the American auto companies, and companies like Huawei and the Chinese startups that are getting state-funded money for free to build their own competitive GPUs for AI purposes. Primarily, this is all for AI. It's an AI arms race, is what it is. Uh, they're going to be like the Toyota and Honda of the 21st century, so to speak. So Chinese companies are going to be like Toyota and Honda in the early days of those companies rising, and NVIDIA and AMD are going to be basically General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. I guess Intel's Chrysler. So yeah, in that order. So you're gonna see in the next 5 to 10 years, China. I don't know why my camera is like strangely out of focus, but I don't know what happened here. Wait, let me see. I don't know what's going on there. That's weird. Okay. You're gonna see like Chinese GPUs start coming to the market at some point. They already kind of have them, and a lot of them, they just don't compete in the gaming space. But I think at some point they're going to branch out because this AI stuff is going to hit a certain, like a first level saturation point, and then they're going to have to, basically to get more revenue, those Chinese chip giants are going to have to like spread out. They're going to have to like sell into other markets, and gaming is one of them. So it's only a matter of time. Anyone who's been over there knows the writing is on the wall. Jensen is already very, very concerned about this. He's talked about this multiple times in news interviews, how the U.S. is kind of kneecapping their own companies. So hopefully that narrative kind of changes, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Yeah, China does have their own like social issues for their younger workforce and stuff like that. So it's not like they're problem free. No country is perfect, so they definitely have like their own challenges. They have like some ridiculous problems right now where it's like ageism is a huge problem in the workplace for tech companies in China. Basically, I saw this Chinese news documentary about like if you're like 35 years old, once you hit 35 years of age in China, you are more susceptible to being laid off just randomly, and they can't do it. Oh, so it's like the law forbids like that kind of like, it's basically ageism. So you can't like lay someone off for their age. But in China, what they're doing is they're making some other sort of criteria, some kind of BS excuse to lay off older workers. So it's creating a huge problem over there. When I heard about this, I was like, well, they're going to kind of hinder themselves with some of these weird, like, company things that the Chinese government is probably going to crack down on some of that stuff, to be honest, knowing how that government is. But it's interesting, like, seeing how a big country similar to America in terms of capability, just because of its sheer size, is not flawless. Like, it has lots of problems. Lots and lots of problems. And America's no different. America's not a perfect country either. I think America airs its dirty laundry more publicly than China does. So it's like people kind of roll their eyes when they hear like bad news in the US, but it's like, well, China tries to keep a tight lid on some of that stuff, but it still leaks out, and you can see how they're not perfect either. So we'll see how things change with the GPU market. It's going to be interesting because AI is not going anywhere. Regardless of what the gamers desire, AI is only going to take more and more of the GPU market share over the next couple of decades. And I think what we're going to expect to see more about quantum computing in the next decade, because I think unless TSMC and Intel can pull off some kind of miracle within the next 5 to 10 years, don't expect to see massive leaps in performance from new hardware generations. So like Zen 6, Zen 7, Zen 8, etc. Don't expect those to have these huge leaps and bounds in like single thread performance, because we're kind of at a limit now in silicon technology, and we're going to need to discover some newer technology to basically leapfrog the technology like way beyond the current limitations. So that's basically what I'm saying is we're gonna have to use something like quantum computing, and then of course the power grid is another problem too, everywhere, not just in the U.S. So anyway, that is a look at the next gen graphics cards. The 50 series is very disappointing, but that's because, like I just said, there's no new node. That's 50 series is basically 40 series on another node, or it's basically overclocked 40 series. And until we get a new node, like a brand new node, you're not gonna see massive leaps in performance, especially in the middle of the stack and the entry level. And that's the reason why cards like the 5070 and the 5060 are so terrible and disappointing. Actually, everything from the 5080 down is completely disappointing when you compare the performance uplift versus the 40 series, and then you compare the 40 series to the 30 series, and the 30 series to the 20 series. So it's almost like technology has kind of like stagnated, and it's the same thing with the CPUs. Like when you look at Zen 5 from AMD, and Zen 5, yes, it is faster than Zen 4, but it's not like, oh, it's so much faster than Zen 4 that you immediately notice the difference in some random CPU bound game if you go from one CPU to another. Same thing with Intel. Intel technically is even worse because Intel's latest CPU is actually slower in gaming than their previous CPU. So that's another example of taking a huge risk on changing your technology and then having it like not exactly align with your performance goals. You can't get all the things you want in there, so you have to trade it off. So Intel traded off performance for energy efficiency, and that's the results that you get with Intel's Arrow Lake. So yeah, I guess it's kind of doom and gloom. This sounds like it's doom and gloom for people who are into building PCs. It is stagnation, but it's not all bad news. Like there will be a new node. TSMC will have a new node. AMD is going to use that new node next year. So Zen 6 is probably going to be way more impressive than Zen 5 was compared to Zen 4. And I don't know what Intel's doing. I just want Intel to put out another CPU on Z890. Otherwise, Intel's basically cooked. Like if Z890, if Arrow Lake is the only CPU for Intel's current motherboards, Intel's basically cooked, because that means not only did the diehard Intel fans buy Arrow Lake just to support Intel and then hope that they would get newer CPUs that were better than Arrow Lake and can actually beat Raptor Lake and Zen 5 in gaming. If that's not the case, I think Intel will have further damaged their reputation in the value equation compared to AMD. So that's why Intel's in a weird spot right now, guys, and that's the reason why their stock price is what it is. Because that's only one. So the PC DIY is a tiny piece of the market, but it extends beyond that. You know, like the whole failure of the Raptor Lake cores and that sort of thing, that affected lots of businesses. That was not just gamers that were impacted by that. I mean, there's other things too. There were like the bad comments that Gelsinger made that kind of annoyed TSMC, and that didn't blow over well, and then he was basically let go after that. And then, you know, it's just kind of weird moves. And then the whole like rumor about Intel was going to like get bought out by ARM or Qualcomm or something, whoever it was. And then when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, no, that's never gonna happen, because the U.S. government won't let that happen, because they literally gave them all that public taxpayer money. So it's like, yeah, they haven't been making a lot of good moves. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of embarrassing. Kind of embarrassing. So, I haven't looked at anything on Zen 7. It's interesting you're saying Zen 7 is stacked 3D cores. Huh. That is the type of stuff that we would need, though. That's what I mean. Like, innovation is going to have to come from doing things differently, not just expecting a massive node shrink, and it's like, oh, now we can put way more transistors on the same die and load it up with performance cores. It's like, it's not really going to work that well anymore. Yeah, you can overclock those. Why wouldn't you be able to? Of course you can overclock them. You just need to know what you're doing. You're worried about Threadripper with no new motherboards for the new launch? So first of all, I wouldn't worry about Threadripper. There are going to be new motherboards and Threadripper. So for those of you that are waiting on Threadripper, Threadripper is coming out at the end of the summer this year. So if you're someone who wants a Threadripper that is Shimada Peak, Zen 5, either Ryzen Threadripper or Threadripper Pro, you'll be waiting for, I think, like August, September. So it's going to be a while. The reason why you haven't seen any motherboards is because it's so far out. It's not like it's right around the corner. We're talking like, what is this, it's at least 3 months away. So you got to wait a whole nother quarter if you're someone who's willing to build a brand new Threadripper. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that about Threadripper's release window, because I actually know Threadripper's release window. Like, I actually know. I'm not going to tell you guys the exact day, but what I've already said is late summer. So that's when you can expect Threadripper. I'm not going to tell you guys the actual day. We'll just say late summer. I think I've said enough on that. Okay. So the other thing is Elden Ring Nightreign is out now. Depending on where you are in the world, this is kind of like a change of topic to the gaming. We will be live streaming Elden Ring Nightreign. This is meant to be played with friends or randoms. So even if you don't have any friends that are interested in playing Elden Ring, or they don't like this type of game, like if it's too hard for them or whatever, you can still play it with randoms, and it's not as fun with randoms. I mean, I played the network test. The network test was only with randoms, and it was not that bad. I was able to clear the final boss of the network test, which I think is like the first major boss in the actual game, and it's not that bad. So I think the game is fun. I don't think this is game of the year though. Like, anytime people see like a From Software game, they immediately assume it's game of the year. This game is it's not a controversial game. It's just a very divisive game. Like, the fan base is divided on whether or not they actually want to play it, because a lot of the people who like the From Software games, they like being in like a world to explore and be challenged constantly. Like, this is the type of game. Elden Ring is a game that you will never become bored. Like, you'll never find yourself yawning and falling asleep. Like, by comparison, if I play Genshin Impact, if I force myself to play Genshin Impact, I am yawning and falling asleep constantly within like 5 minutes of playing the game. Like, I'm already falling asleep. When I play Elden Ring, I am never falling asleep. Like, the game requires so much attention. It demands your attention that you just don't fall asleep. So Nightreign is even more like, oh man, like, at least in Elden Ring, you can like stop moving and like look around. Nightreign, you can't stop moving. You're constantly moving, man. If you're someone who likes speed running, only you have to do like multiplayer. I guess you can play solo in this game, but I don't think solo is gonna be that fun in this game. I could be wrong, but this is definitely the sort of game that I feel like is meant to be played with friends. It's like Elden Ring with friends is probably what the name should be instead of Nightreign. But it is definitely From Software's most different game that they've made in a long time. And this game has nothing to do with Miyazaki. Because this is basically... So, guys, think of it like... Remember when From Software was making Dark Souls 2? They had a team working on Dark Souls 2 while Miyazaki was working on Bloodborne for Sony. So they had 2 games parallel development. Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was not made by Miyazaki, and that is the reason why Dark Souls 2 is considered the black sheep of the family. It's like it's the weird one that stands out in terms of all the Dark Souls games, because it doesn't really seem like the other Dark Souls games. It plays very differently. It has weird stuff like soul memory and adaptability and all kinds of controversial things that people didn't like. So Nightreign is the same kind of thing. Nightreign was directed by one of the junior directors and a team that was not working with Miyazaki. So Nightreign is their like Dark Souls 2 game, and I think Dusk Blood or whatever the game is that Miyazaki is working on for the Nintendo Switch 2 that's coming out next year, that is going to be the actual big Miyazaki game that is going to wow everyone, and it's going to be a Switch 2 exclusive. I don't know if it's a timed exclusive or what, but it could end up being like Bloodborne, where Bloodborne was a PlayStation 4 exclusive, and to this day, it's like literally been it's like a decade old, and you can only play it on PlayStation 4 after all these years. So that's ridiculous. So the next big Miyazaki game is probably going to be like Bloodborne. It's like you got to have a Switch 2 if you want to play it, with the multiplayer and all that stuff. So, yeah, that'll be the next interesting game. But, yeah. Nightreign is pretty good, regardless, even though Miyazaki had nothing to do with it. Definitely feels like a game that he wasn't involved in, though. You have zero interest. If your friend wanted to play it, but he just started Elden Ring, he's not crazy about it. Yeah, it's a very different game. So it's like hard to... It's almost like I wish they didn't use the Elden Ring name, but this is not like Elden Ring at all. Has Easy Anti-Cheat fixed their issues? I'm not sure what you're talking about. I don't have any problems with Easy Anti-Cheat causing BSOD. No. We're going to be live streaming this game like this weekend, and it's not going to... I can tell you right now, it's not going to be crashing. It's not going to be crashing. So, and it's going to be on Windows 11 24H2 when we're going to be playing it. Basically, all the people that are streaming this game right now are playing it on Windows 24H2, and they're not having any problems. So I assume that the problem that you're seeing is a problem that's local to your computer, and it has nothing to do with the actual game. It's probably some third-party app that's interacting with the Easy Anti-Cheat in a bad way. HEZ was saying you don't have to buy... Yeah. If you already have a Threadripper motherboard and you want to just do an upgrade to the new Threadripper 9000, you can do that. All you gotta do is update the BIOS. You don't have to buy a new motherboard. If you already have one. Most people that are thinking of getting Zen 5 Threadripper are probably don't have a Threadripper already, or they have a very old one which would require them to get a new motherboard. As always, if you're in that boat, I recommend waiting for the new motherboards. The new motherboards tend to have better BIOSes than the older ones. Alright, so Elden Ring Nightreign developer warns that players with the latest graphics cards may experience frame rate drops. Wait, what does this mean? Like, is this fake news? Wait, no, they're actually warning them. While it is not specified which new graphics cards currently have trouble running the game, it's very likely the Elden Ring developer was talking about The NVIDIA are, oh, here we go again. 50 series, another reason why it's a complete skip. The NVIDIA RTX 50 series cards, as during my over 30 hours with Elden Ring Nightreign, I did not experience any significant performance issue on RTX 4080. As such, if you own one of these new GPUs, it's maybe a good idea to hold off getting the game. Well, we'll see. I highly doubt that this will be a problem. This is more, I don't know what would this, like, why would this be a problem? When it's literally the same game engine that Elden Ring runs on. It's literally Elden Ring under the hood. So, I don't know, man. This is weird. Huawei is expected to break semiconductor barriers with development of high-end 3nm GAA chips tape out by next year. So they are coming in fast. They are coming in fast. The Kirin. Huawei is also developing a carbon-based 3nm design, which will feature carbon nanotubes, an alternative to silicon-based transistors and interconnects. Okay. Basically, they're going to build an organic computer. Interesting. Organic CPU, not inorganic CPU. Wow. A living CPU. Edible CPU. You heard Huawei claim is false? What do you mean? Well, I think we're going to start seeing more stuff that's not just typical semiconductor. Because material sciences is where there's pockets of new innovation to be found. So no, I kind of think that they need to do something like this. It may not even amount to anything useful. Like, it may end up being, like, significantly worse than your standard silicon transistors, but at least they're trying something different. NVIDIA confirms Huawei's Cloud Matrix AI cluster now competes with Grace. Blackwell says there's no stopping them. There's no stopping them. Huawei is on the rise. The CEO has validated that Huawei is on par when it comes to AI performance, claiming they are progressing quickly. See? Now, when NVIDIA gets, like, all alarmed about something like this, making these alarming claims, when NVIDIA is, like, you know, eyebrows raised, that is a big deal. That is a big deal. It's not easy to impress NVIDIA. NVIDIA's competitors, basically AMD and Intel, they don't scare NVIDIA at all. Like, NVIDIA's like, nah, you guys are like, you know, like, you guys are like Krillin and Yamcha. You know, like, you guys, it's like if NVIDIA is Vegeta or Goku or whatever, then AMD and Intel are like Krillin and Yamcha. It's like, they're not really a threat. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like, nah. These boys, they ain't gonna do nothing. They ain't gonna do nothing. But he sees Huawei over there. He's like, Huawei, whoa, Majin Buu, what is this? It's like, no, oh man. So it's like, whoa, time out. So, see, that's what's going on here. So they need to watch out. This is turning into the Majin Buu saga. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, Huawei is gonna start turning all those Chinese startups into cookies and gobstoppers, eating them up and getting more power, getting more powerful, transforming into Super Buu. This could become a huge problem for NVIDIA down the line. Now, currently, NVIDIA still has their special technique, their CUDA ecosystem, that no one can touch them. That is the reason why, Like AMD and Intel, they can't even turn into Super Saiyans. Like they're nothing. They're like basically Earth humans. They're Earthling. They can't even do anything because they don't have like they don't have a CUDA ecosystem. Like Intel has a bunch of like open source things that are kind of mishmash everywhere here and there, and then AMD has like all that Linux Rock'em stuff, which is good. But it's like, okay, if you're on Linux, it's like AMD on Linux can turn Super Saiyan and maybe even Super Saiyan 2. But AMD on Windows can't even go Super Saiyan against NVIDIA. So that's why they're not even seen as a threat. Like, they aren't even close in power level. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, the gamers, you guys don't know about, like, the software ecosystem, but at least you guys know Dragon Ball Z. So if I can break it down in Dragon Ball Z analogy, now I think people understand the difference. Now people understand why NVIDIA is so far ahead of their American competitors, or I guess multinational competitors, Intel and AMD. Those guys are like basically jokers. They can't even do anything. And it's like NVIDIA basically left those guys in the dust so long ago, and now they're flying through outer space, and they ran into this random Majin Buu called Huawei somewhere here, and it's like, uh-oh, there's like some big power level over here. What are we gonna do? See, that's basically what's happening in the software AI ecosystem. So it's gonna be a big battle. It's gonna be a big battle. That's what's gonna happen. I don't know how else to describe it. That's basically what it is. So oh, and then Elon Musk is still trying to get the whole thing, the Mars program. You know, that's an interesting program. Like, he wants to colonize Mars. Now this is completely different from what we normally talk about on the channel. But I think the prospect of, I don't really see us like colonizing another planet anytime soon. But at least, like, if we were to build like a giant space station, like a Deep Space Nine style space station that could hover in the atmosphere of a planet like Venus or Mars. Actually, I actually think the idea of creating a giant space station that kind of like exists in the atmosphere of the planet Venus might be a good idea, or it might be more possible than trying to like colonize Mars, because you don't need to land on the planet Venus, because obviously you can't land there. It's too hostile, it's too hot and dangerous. But there are layers of the atmosphere that technically you can still have the spacecraft exist, like, without any issues. Supposedly. I don't know. Like, I heard that somewhere. I forget when I heard that, but yeah. Colonizing space and stuff seems very interesting. But this seems like it's something that is so far off. But you do need visionary type people to try to like at least make an attempt in their lifetime to push the industry forward. So I do think that at least he's trying something. So you got to give the guy credit. At least he has these grand plans and he dreams big. Because, you know, that eventually, like, what's going to happen? Are we going to end up in like Interstellar? The 2014 movie, where the soil on the earth is eroded and you can't really grow crops that easily anymore. And I mean, that's basically the premise of Interstellar. So it's like, what's the next best choice? Mars or a giant space station hovering the earth, or Venus, or both? We'll need artificial gravity first. Yeah, artificial gravity, they already can do it. You just have to have the spacecraft spinning. Like in the movie Interstellar. That's where AI could actually help, though. Because you apply the problem to AI, and AI can come up with some very interesting solutions that may or may not be actually possible. But that is another thing that AI is going to potentially push technology into the next phase in terms of acceleration, because otherwise we're kind of stagnating. We're definitely stagnating here. Yeah, I think that's basically it. X870E Ace. I can't find... So MSI still doesn't have the website up.
GTR, do you think you'll do a block diagram for the Asus Crosshair X870E Extreme?
We can do a block diagram for the Crosshair Extreme if you want. We can definitely do that. Let me see. Hold on. Oh, wait. Let's go here first. So Asus still doesn't supply the thing, right? They don't give you the block diagram even on a $1,000 motherboard. I don't think they do have it. Oh, they do have it. Okay. Asus, listen to me. They finally decided to provide the block diagram. This is a very confusing block diagram. Well, no, it's actually kind of like ASRock's block diagram. So they do have it. They do have the block diagram, and you can see how they've done it. But they've kind of... It's confusing to look at because they have all the other chips that I typically don't show in my block diagram because... Who wants to look at a bunch of USB ports? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're showing you all these USB ports and the BIOS flashback chip, and they show you how it's wired. That's interesting to see how it's wired. I don't understand why this needs to connect into the chipset and the CPU. Why can't it just connect to the CPU? Oh, you know why? Maybe... No, because this is the BIOS... SP, I don't know. Well, anyway, that's interesting. They give you more info than you actually need. But what's cool is it actually shows how the LCD is connected. The LCD is connecting on a USB 2.0 interface into the second chipset. So I think it's better if we just draw this because this looks so confusing. But yeah, let's bring up paint and let's actually draw it because it'll probably be more, it'll be easier to see on there. But what I can do is I can like pull this to the side so I can make sure that I'm labeling it correctly. But okay, so let's do the block diagram. It's been a while since I've done these. So Asus put those two side by side, which was interesting. I'm going to put these one after the other. But you basically have the AM5 CPU socket. You have the Promontory 21 chipset. This is the first one. And then you have the second one. Now, what I think AMD will probably do with the next motherboards, I want to see them update the chipset. They need a new chipset. Whether they're going to do two again, or if they're going to do one big one, like Intel. Either way, or their AM4 chipset, which was one big one. Like, either way, I think they need a newer chipset. Because this is getting a little long in the tooth, because this is still basically the same as the X670E. So over here you have that. Here you have your memory channels. And then of those you have two additional. So if this is channel B, you have B1 and B2, and if this is channel A, you have A1 and A2. So these are your memory channels. A1, A2, B1, B2. Like this. This is the DDR5. The DDR5 channels. It's dual channel. You can see dual channel. Even though there's 4 memory sticks, it's still only dual channel. If this was Threadripper, you would literally have one wire per channel. So you literally would have 4 connections going to the CPU, and it would not be A1, A2, B1, B2. It would be channel A, channel B, channel C, and channel D. So that is the difference between a quad channel system and a dual channel system. So that is the memory system. So then over here, we have the PCIe 5.0. There are 24 lanes on X870 for all X870, not just the Crosshair Extremes. This is for all X870 motherboards. And then you have the downlink, and then you have the other downlink. So there's 28 total. Why is it only 24? Because the last 4 are down here. Then you have 4 down here. And when we talk about the chipset lanes, the chipsets, each of them have Gen 4 on the left and Gen 3 on the right. So they always have PCI 3.0 X4, each of them, for whatever that you want to do with the Gen 3s. And this is typically going to be like the 10 gig LAN, the 5 gig LAN, the Wi-Fi 7, all the networking stuff, and all the SATA are going to connect to the PCI Gen 3. PCI Gen 4. Here we have 4 lanes. And down here, we have 8 lanes. Why does the second chipset get 4 more lanes than the first one? Because the reality is they all have the same amount, both have the same amount of lanes. I got 4 over here, I got 4 going up this way, and I got 4 going this way, and I got 4 going down. 4, 8, 12, 16. 16 lanes on this chipset. So the math adds up. Now let's add the other one. 8 plus 4, that's 12, plus 4, that's 16. The math lines up. 4, 8, 12, 16. So 16 total. 4, 8, 16. 16 total. Why does this guy have 4 more lanes going over here? Because he doesn't have anything going down here. So instead of this guy had to devote his 4 final lanes to the downlink connection. This guy doesn't have a downlink. So those remaining lanes get totaled here. That is the reason why the lower chipset has more Gen 4 lanes than the middle one or the top one. Okay, so on the Asus chipsets for the Crosshair Hero, they have, so, okay, on the bottom one, they have something, actually, what are they doing on the first one? Let's see. So they're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so Asus is doing all SATA off of this one. So they're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. They're taking one lane of Gen 3 per SATA interface. So you get 4 SATA drives on the Crosshair Extreme. So that takes care of all of the Gen 3 lanes off of the primary chipset. So those are storage. Those are the slow storage, the legacy storage. Which means all of the network connectivity is going to be down here. So sure enough, on this one, they're going to take... yes, okay, I was right. It's like having the answer sheet in front of me for this one, but it just, the only thing that having their official block diagram does is it makes it so I don't have to guess. Like, if without their block diagram, I could have just put the 10 gig, the 5 gig, and the Wi-Fi up here, and I could have put the SATA down here. And it's like a 50-50 guess which one it is. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be the same result in terms of the performance. But Asus officially is doing 10 gig LAN with 2 Gen 3 lanes. We've proven this. I've proven this in 2 different YouTube videos. Because a lot of people were wondering, like, do you need 4 lanes for a 10 gig network card? No, you don't. You only need 2 Gen 3 lanes. If you were on an older like a Gen 2 motherboard, so like the AMD FX 8350, for example, that didn't support PCI Gen 3. Or if you're on an Intel Sandy Bridge, 2nd gen i7 2600K, that doesn't support PCI Gen 3. So those only run at Gen 2 speeds. So those would need 4 lanes of Gen 2 for a 10 gigabit network card. But these newer chipsets, PCI Gen 3 is useful because you can put like 10 gig LAN with only 2 lanes. And you can easily fit all your SATA on like a low count Gen 3 bus. So then they've got the 5 gig. So that's 1 lane. You only need, why would you need 2 lanes for 5 gig? 1 lane 5 gig, 2 lane 10 gig. So we got 1 more lane here. The final lane, because there's 4 total. This one is going to be the Wi-Fi 7. So all your networking on the Crosshair Extreme hangs off of the bottom chipset, and the legacy SATA storage goes on the primary. So that's how they've decided to do it. Alright, so now we have 4 lanes over here. Now, this is going to be this is where it gets kind of interesting. Because I always wondered how they did this. And now that they have the block diagram, I don't have to guess anymore. So this is going to be something known as the dim.2 underscore 2. So one of the the crosshair extreme, well, we got to go back to the gallery here. The crosshair extreme comes with this module right here called the dim.2. It is an Asus proprietary adapter for NVMe storage. Now this thing can fit 2 SSDs, one on each side, and they're both Gen 4 SSDs, if I'm not mistaken, and it's going to go right here next to the RAM. That's where you would plug those in. Okay. So when we go to the tech spec page, this is an Asus proprietary technology. So under storage, AMD X870E chipset dim.2 underscore 1 and dim.2 underscore 2. These are going to be PCI Gen 4 X4 lanes. That implies they are on the chipset. So both of the DIMM drives connect to the chipset. And one of them, was it the second one? Where is it? Right here. Right here. This is the first chipset. This is the second chipset. So this is the lower one. This is the top one. The top one, like I said, has 4 lanes of Gen 4. This is going to go to dim.2 underscore 2 PCI 4.0. So there it is. That means that the other one is going to be on the lower chipset. And sure enough, here we go. PCI 4.0 X4. There you go. So now we go back over here. That means that this, the other dim.2 is wired over here. Dim.2 underscore 1. So the first one is actually on the lower chipset. The second one is on the upper chipset. That is interesting. And then they also have 4 more lanes available. Because remember, there's 8 down here. So these 4 more lanes are for something called Slim SAS. The Slim SAS connector makes a return. We saw this on the Crosshair Hero, but the Crosshair Extreme also features the Slim SAS connector. So that is how they're utilizing those 8 lanes. One of them goes to one of the DIMM SSDs. The other one goes to the Slim SAS connector at the very bottom of the motherboard. And I can see it in the gallery. If we go back here, the Crosshair, so I don't know which one I like more in terms of the placement, but right down here, you can see where my mouse is circling around it. There is the Slim SAS connector pointing downward. So if you're going to plug a cable in, it's going to have to be routed through the back of the case, come through, and plug in straight in from down at the bottom of the motherboard. So I don't know if that's better or worse, but the Slim SAS is down here instead of on the side like on the Hero. So, but it's got all these like switches and dials for overclocking here too. And it does have a very nice Gen 5 heatsink because this one actually has a big metal heat pipe. That was one of the one of the things I didn't like about the Hero is the lack of a proper Gen 5 heatsink. The Gen 5 heatsink on the Hero is significantly worse than the one on the Extreme. This one has a really thick heat pipe here, and it's a much longer, so I can tell that this one is going to handle the Gen 5 temperatures a lot better. A vapor chamber heatsink, yeah. I think it also has like a RAM cooler. Yes, it also has the fan featured on the Apex. So this has a DIMM.2, it has a RAM cooling fan and bracket, just like the Apex, and it has the Slim SAS, just like the Hero. So this motherboard literally has, it's like a fusion between the Hero and the Apex. It takes like the best things of both of those motherboards and combines them together. You get the RAM cooler, and you get the Slim SAS. And you get the backplate. Although the AMD Apex does have a backplate. For some reason, the Intel Apex does not have a backplate. For a $750 motherboard, that is unacceptable to not have a backplate. The other thing that the Extreme is doing, they are actually using thermal heat pads on the back here to pull the heat away from the 2 chipsets. So you can see Promontory number 1 and Promontory number 2 are physically, like, you know where they are because of the way ASUS created this backplate. So you have a very nice backplate on this motherboard. But for $1,000, it needs to have a premium backplate. So this one also fixes another problem that the Hero had. The Hero only had 6 USB Type A 10 gig ports and no 10 gig LAN. The Extreme adds 2 more of these red ports, so it has a total of 8 USB Type A, which is the correct amount. I was complaining about the Hero not having enough USB ports. And then it also has the 10 gig LAN, unlike the Hero. So it corrects the issues that the Hero had with its rear I/O. So very vastly improved, but you're having to pay like $300 to get 2 more USB ports, a 10 gig LAN, a RAM cooler, and the better heatsink. And I guess the DIMM.2 has a better heatsink, so compared to the Hero's heatsink for its SSDs. But anyway, Those are the differences. So the Extreme will outperform the Hero in terms of thermals for the components that go on the motherboard. Okay, so moving on, the last thing is we need to show the GPU lane sharing, because this motherboard has lots of GPU lane sharing up here happening. So it has the 16 lanes. It has 16 lanes here, and it has 4 lanes here. The 4 lanes, you guys already know, that is for the first SSD. This is going to be for M.2_1. This is the Gen 5. This is the no compromise, no lane sharing Gen 5 SSD slot. So this is the one that has the really thick vapor chamber heat pipe. So that one has no lane sharing, and it goes straight into the CPU for the lowest latency and the highest transfer speeds. Then you have a giant block. You have like a big switch here that goes in here. And this thing basically splits out all the lanes for... There's 4 different things that connect in here. You have the primary PCIe. So you have PCIe, they call it PCIe X16_1. That's what they officially call it. And then the other one is going to be PCIe X16_2. I'll have to we're going to have to space this out a little bit more. But you guys get the idea. And then you have M.2_2 and M.2_3. So these are the 4 devices that share the 16 lanes. Now, when this is empty, and this is empty, and this is empty, this gets all 16 lanes. The moment you plug something in to the second PCIe slot down at the bottom, now this is going to be, so basically we're going to have to create a matrix table. So when this is X16, this is X16. If this is empty, this is empty, and this is empty. How do I want to do this? I guess, well, okay. I guess that's close enough. So if you have the GPU and nothing else, the GPU gets full Gen 5 16 lanes. The moment you plug something in the second slot, this becomes X8. This is X8. This is 0. And this is 0. They still don't have anything plugged in. Now, the moment let's say you do not plug anything in here. The moment you plug anything in M.2_2, this will be disabled. This will still have nothing in it. And this will run at X8. So it will be X8, 0, X4, and 0. That is when you have an SSD. Let's say you want a second Gen 5 SSD. You plug it into M.2_2. This will automatically disable the second Gen 5 PCIe slot. Automatically, no matter what. As soon as this guy's turned on, this guy's turned off. So, the final combination. Let's say you move this SSD into the third slot. So now you make this guy empty and this guy has the X4. This guy then turns on again and he can be used. He only gets disabled. He goes hard shutdown if this goes to X4. So if this is 0, but this is 4, this guy will give half of his lanes to the final M.2 slot. So this will run at X8. This will run at X4. This will be empty, and this will have 4 lanes available. So the way you can maximize, let's say I want to run dual graphics cards and I want dual Gen 5 SSDs. That means I have to do this combination. One graphics card here, one graphics card here, nothing in this one, and my second Gen 5 SSD goes in M.2_3. This is guaranteed to work. I have actually tested this on the X870E Crosshair Hero, so I know exactly how this behaves. The Extreme and the Hero, and I think possibly also the Apex, all function exactly the same in terms of how this works. Okay, and the final is, I think that's the final combination. Yeah, that's the final combination. Actually, no, there's one more. There's one more. Now, what if you don't have a second graphics card, but you want to run a third Gen 5 SSD? So we can do that. X8, X0, X4, and X4. So this will work. So you can run 2 Gen 5 SSDs plus the graphics card plus another. So you can do 1, 2, 2, 3 Gen 5 SSDs plus the graphics card running at X8 lanes. Or you can do 1, 2 Gen 5 SSDs with dual graphics cards. So the one thing to remember, the moment you plug an SSD into the second M.2, you lose your second PCIe slot. And you drop your graphics card to 8 lanes. This is guaranteed to happen. So this is a hard switch behavior in this MUX chip from ASUS. So that's how that works. So keep that in mind. So my word of advice, the second M.2 should be the very last M.2 that you populate. And it is a no-go if you must use the second PCIe slot. So this motherboard can still do 4 SSDs with no GPU lane sharing. It'll be 1 Gen 5 and 3 Gen 4. So that's 4 SSDs plus 16 lanes on the graphics card. Or we can do 4 SSDs with dual graphics cards running at X8. This configuration that I have circled right here is how I personally run the Crosshair that we are streaming live on right this very moment. The only difference is I am using the Hero instead of the Extreme. And the Hero has this exact same behavior. So the only difference is instead of this DIMM.2, the Hero features regular M.2 slots on the physical motherboard. So I have a video showing how to avoid GPU lane sharing and still run 4 SSDs on the ASUS Crosshair. And this is exactly how I'm running it. I'm using Slim SAS for the 4th and final SSD. We have a whole video on how to do this. All right. And that pretty much covers it. So that is the X870E Crosshair Extreme demystified. This is either an 8-layer board or a 10-layer board. So many workloads are random read. Given the heat, I just don't think Gen 5 SSDs are worth it. The newer Gen 5 SSDs don't generate as much heat. Okay, compared to the Godlike has exactly the same right here. This is exactly the same on the Godlike. The only difference is the Godlike does not have these physical M.2 slots right here. The Godlike does. The Godlike has... Okay, well, how do we want to do this? I guess I can make this larger. Well, Let me see. If we, what if I zoom out? Make this larger. Zoom, yeah, actually that's how I can do it. Okay, I know what to do. Okay, so we'll zoom in, zoom back in. So the Godlike, okay, all I gotta do is copy this whole thing. Actually, no, copy this. So now we'll do the Godlike next to this. So we'll do a side by side. The only thing that changes is the left side. The Godlike's right side is identical to the Extreme. So the SATA and the PCIe 3.0, the Wi-Fi 7, the 10 gig LAN, the 5 gig LAN, the Godlike actually, Asus actually copied MSI because MSI's Godlike came out first and Asus wasn't even sure they were going to do an Extreme. They just ended up scrambling to do one because the X3D was so popular, I guess, on consumer desktop. So anyway, so now we're going to do the MSI. This is going to be the X870E Godlike from MSI. Okay, so here we have it's the same deal. We have the Gen 5, we have this Gen 4 with only like 4 lanes, and we have this guy. Now, MSI, you guys already know, it's exactly the same. Like, it's 4.0 X4, it's 4.0 X8. So let's do these first. Now, MSI has something special here. Well, actually, yeah. MSI is doing a special thing. They have a switch here. They've got a switch. Okay. Just like how Asus had that big switch over here, the Godlike has a small switch that hangs off of the chipset. So they're doing their own shenanigans. They're doing their own special. Something's... But, okay, actually, hold on. I want to portray this differently. Because this is not actually a switch. There is a significant difference in the behavior. MSI does not actually have a switch. That is, I was actually wrong there. They have a splitter. They're doing a splitter. And this might explain why MSI has been having a lot of issues recently with certain storage devices. So now we're going to explain how that's happening. So they're doing what's called bandwidth sharing. So everyone, I think, is familiar. Anyone who's watched my motherboard videos, you guys understand the concept of GPU, or not GPU, of PCIe lane sharing. Sharing of resources via an actual switch. A chip that will, when it, for example, like we said earlier, when it detects that this is turned on, like it detects that someone installed an SSD here, it will switch. It'll take lanes from this, and it will give them to this, so that this can work. And then it will disable this one, so it cannot be enabled. Meaning, if I plug a second graphics card in down here. And I also have an SSD plugged in M.2_2. The switch has its own firmware to have a priority table. And it says, if I have an SSD in M.2_2 and a second device, it doesn't have to be a GPU. It can be a capture card. It can be whatever. It can be an NVMe adapter for another SSD in this guy. If it detects that something is here and something is here, it will automatically force this one to be disabled, even though there is something physically installed. It'll override it to prevent a race condition on the circuit. So M.2_2 has priority over the second PCIe slot. It has the highest priority of all these things. This is the concept of lane sharing via the switch. So this is lane sharing. MSI is not using the chip for lane sharing. Instead, they're using a splitter technology to divide the lanes dynamically, meaning it will allow a device that is connected on a PCIe X4 slot, such as a second graphics card or a capture card, like a Elgato or an AverMedia Live Gamer 4K, for example. It'll allow this to be enabled while also allowing an SSD to be installed. So this is 4 lanes, all 4 lanes, but it is dynamically sharing the 4 lanes between 2 devices simultaneously. Now, sometimes this works fine. Other times, depending on the device that's installed, the device may not like that it's sharing lanes, because you could get potential data like loss, not data loss in the sense that the device has to retransmit, or there's a delay, or it's having to buffer to do the read operation, for example. So this is not actually as good as, I mean, okay, on paper, this feature sounds like it's really, really good, because it's like, oh, I can have my SSD installed and I can still use my X4 PCIe slot at the very bottom of the motherboard and it will work fine. Now, most of the time it's fine, but sometimes devices don't like this. So I'm speaking from experience here. The AverMedia Live Gamer 4K does not like when it is sharing lanes with an SSD. So oftentimes what will happen is when you cold start the computer, the capture card doesn't boot up correctly. It's like still initializing and you can't use it. Windows shows up code 31 device manager, this device cannot start. You restart the computer and it works fine. Or sometimes you restart the computer and it still doesn't work. So there are problems that you can run into with compatibility when you do bandwidth sharing on the PCIe bus. So I was a huge fan of this feature when I first saw it, but as someone who is using the Godlike on a daily basis, I have run into lots of problems with bandwidth sharing that it's basically too good to be true, and I don't really like it that much anymore. So to me, the tried and true lane sharing via PLX is like the better way to go. It's a more reliable solution. As long as you understand the hierarchy of what can be connected, you won't run into problems. Here, it's basically a free-for-all. Anything goes. If it works, it works. If not, too bad. So this is MSI's approach. Now, what they do down here is very basic. They have 2 more SSDs. So MSI is doing M.2_3 and M.2 MSI_5. So MSI has 5 SSDs physically on the Godlike. Now, here, they're doing... So how do we want to do that? I guess we'll have to do this one this way. So they're doing a split. They're doing a split direct off the CPU. Just like with the one they did on the chipset, they're doing one on the CPU. And you guys have probably... We've already covered the Godlike in previous content, so I'm still familiar with how this block diagram works. But here what they have is ASM 4242 sharing with M.2_2. So the USB 4 controller is sharing bandwidth with the second Gen 5 SSD. So they're doing bandwidth sharing straight off the PCIe bus. All right, and then over here, they're basically doing the same deal that the Asus was doing, but this one they got the actual split, the typical split, where you've got your primary graphics card slot, you have your second graphics card slot, and you know this one is going to be PCIe, we'll just say _1. I forget the actual name, and then PCIe _2. And then this one down here is, this one is actually _3, which I didn't name that correctly, but anyway, that's the third one. So you got 3 PCIe slots on the Godlike versus only 2 on the Extreme. So we're going to do some comparisons here. So this one, your choices are X16 with this being empty, or X8 with this guy being X8. So you can do, you know, typical dual GPU. And the last thing they have is the primary M.2_1 has its own dedicated lanes. So this is going to be X16. This is going to be X4. This is going to be X4. And I just realized I forgot to draw one more thing on the Extreme. And you guys already know what it is. It's the final 4 lanes. No one called it out. 24 lanes. 16 plus 4 equals 20. Plus 4 more equals 24. You guys know what goes here. ASM 4242. There it is. USB 4. The dual 40 gigabit USB 4 that every single X870E motherboard has. So there you go. This is the full Crosshair Extreme block diagram. This is the full X870E Godlike diagram. So you guys can see, at first people were probably thinking, man, Asus is doing like some crazy lane sharing over here. Yeah, they are, but MSI is doing way more shenanigans when it comes to bandwidth sharing. So you can see they're doing their PLX split over here, but then they're going and doing this weird bandwidth sharing between their USB 4 and their second Gen 5 SSD. Now, here's the thing where MSI gets pretty interesting. So MSI technically gives you the ability to go into the BIOS and disable, you can hard disable the USB 4 if you're never going to use the USB 4. That will give you the full 4 lanes so you can run a second Gen 5 SSD with its own dedicated 4 lanes with no sharing, no impacting the GPU. Likewise, MSI also lets you go into the BIOS and disable this to give you the full lanes here. Or you can disable this, I believe, and you can guarantee that you have the bandwidth there. I think you can do that. I think you can do either or. So they give you options. So ultimately, the Godlike has more flexibility than the Crosshair Extreme because of this concept of bandwidth sharing. They're doing bandwidth sharing here, and they're doing bandwidth sharing here. So by doing this, they're giving the user 1, 2, 3 PCIe slots. The Crosshair only has 2, but at least they've got the 2 good, like, they're capable of X8, X8. It only has 2 PCIe slots because Asus decides, instead of giving you an X4, like this right here, they use the Slim SAS instead. So Asus is trading an X4 slot for a Slim SAS. That is the difference number one. So the difference is number one, the Godlike gives you your traditional X4 slot, which I think most people are going to be more familiar with if they want to install stuff. Whereas the Extreme kind of forces you to use Slim SAS. And if you're not someone who's already familiar with how to use it, or you don't want to buy the specific custom cables, like a U.2 cable, for example, which we have a video on how to actually do this, to make use of the Slim SAS adapter, then you're probably not going to like that the Crosshair forces you to use a Slim SAS. Now, the thing that the Godlike does that is unique, the Godlike is the only, well, okay, it's not the only, because technically the Tomahawk does this as well. The Godlike is the only flagship motherboard, X870E motherboard, that is offering dual Gen 5 SSDs. Dual Gen 5 with no impact to the graphics card. Meaning, you can run your graphics card at full 16 Gen 5 bandwidth while still using dual Gen 5 SSDs that connect directly to the CPU for the lowest latency and the fastest transfer speeds. This is an advantage that the Godlike has. This is one of the things that makes it a flagship motherboard. It also has that traditional X4. It also gives you the ability to run dual X8 Gen 5 graphics cards while also running dual Gen 5 SSDs. So, this is one of the things that the Godlike is capable of doing that you cannot really do on a lot of the latest motherboards. This is kind of how it justifies its title as Godlike. It also can do a total of 5 SSDs physically on the motherboard. 2 Gen 5 and 3 Gen 4. That is a total of 5 SSDs. Now, compare this with the Extreme. The Extreme gives you 1 dedicated Gen 5 SSD. Then you can run 2 more Gen 4 SSDs. So that's 3. Now, if you want to run a 4th SSD and maintain 16 lanes on the GPU, you must use the Slim SAS adapter for the 4th SSD. So, in terms of total storage options, the Godlike is objectively superior. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 SSDs with full 16 GPU bandwidth versus 4 on the Extreme while maintaining X16 on the GPU. But the caveat is that this requires you to use the DIMM.2. You cannot use the SSD slots that are on the motherboard, besides the really nice heatsink one, if you want to maintain full bandwidth on the graphics card. This is a limitation of the Crosshair Extreme. So keep that in mind. Also, so basically, the way I see it is the Extreme forces you to use the DIMM.2, both DIMM.2 slots, and it forces you to buy an adapter and an enclosure to make use of SlimSAS if you want to maintain 16 lanes of the GPU. Whereas the Godlike, you can do 5 SSDs and you're still at full 16 lanes on the GPU. And here's where it gets even more insane. So let's say I don't care about my GPU running at 16 lanes. I want to run the full amount. Why am I not able to uncircle that? There. I want to run all the SSDs. So I'm going all the SSDs. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and X8 speed on the GPU. So now Asus is like, whoa, I just won up MSI because I'm doing 6 SSDs maxed out. 1, 2, I'm doing 3 Gen 5 SSDs and 3 Gen 4 SSDs. 6 SSDs on the Crosshair Extreme. Max it out. So you're doing 6 SSDs. Okay. Okay. I see how it is. That's cool. So the Godlike's like, all right, hold on. Hold on. MSI gives you in the box, if you guys watched my unboxing video, MSI includes a fancy PCIe card, which has 2 more. Actually, they sideload. They're like hot swappable. They got 2 that plug in like this. MSI's got this little, the expander card. The Godlike includes the expander card for 2 more Gen 5 SSDs. So you can take this thing and you can plug this thing right in here and get 2 more Gen 5 SSDs. So that means utilizing the expander card, that means the Godlike will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 SSDs. 4 Gen 5 and 3 Gen 4. So once again, the Godlike 1-ups the Crosshair Extreme. The Crosshair Extreme, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 SSDs maxed out. Godlike can do 7 SSDs maxed out. So, once again, the Godlike moves ahead in terms of the score against the Extreme. So you guys can see the competition between Asus and MSI in this S-tier bracket is pretty fierce. They don't give up. The MSI has some tricks up its sleeve. Okay. So that kind of answers the question. So basically, here's the takeaway. Asus gives you the 2 additional Gen 5s physically on the board, whereas MSI keeps it in an add-in card. Think of this like M.2_2 and M.2_3 on the Extreme, because they plug in to this. And what's hilarious is someone can take the MSI expander, and if they plug it into the Asus Extreme second slot, they don't use these things. And they basically done the exact same thing. See? So, the two motherboards are capable of different things. You can see now why MSI is charging more money for the Godlike versus Asus. They have more storage options, and also the panel, the removable panel on the motherboard has like all the onboard diagnostic stuff on there. That's the main difference. Without CXL, how can they be unified as a flash array? They wouldn't be a flash array. Someone would simply just use these drives for, like, you know, different storage. Like, for example, someone could make this the Windows drive. They could make this a Steam drive for, like, the latest Unreal Engine 5 games. They could make this one, like, I don't know. They may not even use this one. If they're running like a capture card or something, they'll probably just use this, and then they'll still use these two down here. So they're still able to do like 4 or even 6 SSDs if they're going to use the expander card. So the Godlike does have a lot of nice flexibility in terms of what it can do. But hopefully this illustrates, it does an excellent super chat, because this one, I don't think, this is the first time I've actually done this. We might do this more often, like side-by-side objective comparison between two motherboards in the same category. But you can see how they're similar. They're similar in terms of the connectivity, but MSI has a little bit more flexibility. Unless you're someone who really has like a nice use case for Slim SAS. That Slim SAS does open the door to like enterprise grade storage, like high terabyte, dense NVMe. So that is a nice thing to have. But that is also a very, very expensive type of SSD. The GPU can take up to 16 lanes, but it really only needs 8. Especially if you're on a Gen 5 GPU. The Ace compared to the Godlike. The Ace is basically... Okay, I'm going to guess that the Ace is basically the Godlike without the fancy screen. And they may or may not do something like this on the Ace, or this. It may be more like a Carbon, because the Carbon doesn't do the bandwidth sharing. The only MSI motherboards that do this fancy bandwidth sharing is the Godlike and the Tomahawk. The Carbon does not do this. So I don't know if the Ace is going to be more like the Carbon or if it's going to be more like the Godlike. I'm going to guess that it's going to be more like... It's probably going to have this, but it's probably not going to do this. If I had to guess. Because it'll be like a hybrid. And it may include the expander. Because I believe... Yeah, I'm pretty sure the previous generation Ace featured the expander. The X670E Meg Ace had the expander card. So I'm pretty sure the X870E version will also have the expander. Which means the Ace is going to be very, very competitive with the AI Top Extreme and the Crosshair Hero. That'll be a competitor to the Gigabyte Extreme AI Top and the Crosshair Hero. Ace has 10 gig LAN. Yes, and that is exactly why, like I just said, with 10 gig LAN, it will defeat the Hero in terms of connectivity, because the Hero is a $700 motherboard that doesn't have a 10 gig LAN. That is its biggest flaw. That, and it's missing USB ports on the back. Otherwise, it's an excellent motherboard. The Gigabyte AI Top has dual 10 gig. Why it has dual 10 gig, I have no idea. But apparently there's probably some people out there that would like to have dual 10 gig LAN. So the Ace is not a godlike, or extreme competitor. The Ace is a hero and AI top competitor. You would never put a hard drive in a desktop? I still have 2 hard drives in mine, and I think the hard drives are what slows down the boot time, because you have to initialize them. So let me tell you guys how I have the godlike set up. So the godlike, I'll tell you what I'm using in the godlike. The godlike has a Gen 4 SSD plugged in here, a Gen 3 SSD plugged in here. It has a Live Gamer Bolt plugged in here. It has a graphics card plugged in here. It has a old Gen 3 SSD plugged in. No, actually, no. It doesn't have anything plugged in there. It has old Gen 3 SSDs plugged in here and here. And it has 2 hard drives plugged in here. And it has 2 SATA SSDs plugged in here and here. So, I personally am using almost all of the godlike's features. The only thing I'm not using is I currently don't have anything plugged in here. This is completely empty, and I'm not using the expander currently. So but you guys can see, like me, I'm already using 4 SSDs, and I'm using all 4 of my SATA. 2 of them are 3.5-inch ancient hard drives. So, I can definitely use in fact, I'm thinking of getting like a 4 terabyte SSD to upgrade one of these or plug in here or something. So, because I'm starting to run out of storage on the godlike. Because the YouTube videos take up a lot of space. That's why I need those old hard drives. To store all the channel footage to edit the videos and everything. And then like the Steam library. The Steam library is filling up this and this and this. They're already almost full. So yeah, I need to... Because I never delete games off the drives. So I literally am carrying the entire Steam collection on the godlike. And I probably need to uninstall some games. Because... yeah, but anyway, that's kind of how I have the godlike set up. So hopefully this clarifies for people, like, why these 2 motherboards are the way they are, why the godlike is more expensive than the extreme. It makes sense when you look at it. If you do the analysis, you can see why the godlike costs more money, because it's giving you the option for the expander. It's the only one that can do the dual Gen 5 with no lane sharing, while still offering the ability to do more storage that's Gen 5, or a second GPU, and then it has like more options down here. That's a good question. I'll tell you the things I like about the Hero or the Extreme is I like that it has the RAM fan. Because I kind of wish the Hero came with the RAM fan. But that's not really like a deal breaker or anything. I would have liked to have the RAM fan just to test it out. But in terms of practicality, the godlike does everything that I needed to do. It's not like I have to have Slim SAS. In fact, I would rather not have Slim SAS. I prefer having the traditional X4 slot because it's just easier to work with. If you have a lot of like random things, like if I want to plug a capture card in, I can just plug the capture card. I don't have to deal with buying a cable and an adapter and like a daughter board and all this stuff. No, I don't have to do any of that. That's more money that you have to spend to get features that you already have on the godlike. Now, granted, the godlike costs more money up front, but it's like it already has like all the flexibility. Plus, it has the fancy panel that shows you like your CPU temperature, your chipset temperature, the pump speed, the fan speed, all that stuff. The Godlike has all of that built in on that fancy dynamic dashboard. I don't think the Crosshair Extreme does that by default. I think the screen on there is programmable though. So, it really, I don't know, like, okay, if they were both available back when I got the Godlike, it depends. Like, if I never bought the Hero, because I think I bought the Hero before I got the Godlike. If I didn't get the Hero, I probably would have gotten the Extreme. I would have saved some money with the Extreme rather than paying more for the Godlike. But I do think the Godlike is capable of doing like all the things that I need, hence the reason why I'm using it as the primary computer. So anyway, guys, I think that pretty much covers it. That was a pretty good discussion, but I think that's the end for Tech Thursdays this week. We will be live streaming Elden Ring Nightreign this weekend at some point. Godlike still seems like the better board. Yeah, if you don't care too much about overclocking, because I do think that the Crosshair probably has more overclocking options, but realistically, guys, if you're buying a giant EATX motherboard, do you really think you're going to be using it for hardcore overclocking? Most people that consider motherboards like the Godlike and the Extreme are buying them as mini workstation computers. Like, you're literally building a productivity workstation without paying for a Threadripper. And that's the main advantage that these flagship motherboards offer. They give you as much capability as possible without requiring you to spend like an insane amount of money on a CPU and having to buy registered DIMMs. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this Tech Thursdays. Once again, if you're new to the channel, do get subscribed. We do these open forum discussions every Thursdays, as the name implies. And we do occasional gaming-focused live streams on the weekend, typically either Friday evening or Saturday evening. But that's going to be it for this one. I think this was a great one. So you guys now have the full picture on the new Asus Crosshair Extreme, the full breakdown on its capabilities, where everything connects, and then the Godlike over here for comparison, which we did feature last year when this motherboard was new. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next time. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.